I know we've got a number of family members on here, and I'm the president of Aegis. It's nice to meet you all. Thanks for joining us on I think today is Wednesday. Sometimes I lose track.
Thursday. It's Thursday.
Thursday.
Wish it were Wednesday.
Sorry, Thursday. I'll show you. That shows you that sometimes we all lose track in these crazy times. We're really glad you joined us. Thank you for your time this afternoon. We do these when we have somebody that's really, we think can offer some really valuable advice. We open these up to our families and our teams, and we're in for a treat today because I want to introduce you to Dr. Joe and his wife, Laura. Dr. Joe joined our Coronavirus Advisory Council here at Aegis that we formed right at the beginning of the virus to help kind of inform. We put together a number of people that we thought could be physicians that we thought could be very helpful in informing our approach to the virus. And it was a great group, and Dr. Joe's been a big part of that. And you know, you're meeting someone today who's legendary in many ways, certainly in the naturopathic community. I'll do a quick introduction. I know Dr. Joe, you and Laura are going to walk through a series of slides and then be happy to answer questions. But let me just say a couple of things. I have gotten to know Dr. Joe through this virus council, but he's got a 45-year history in the leading edge of natural medicine, science-based natural medicine. You know, and he started in this well before we understood, you know, we could possibly understand the benefits that we've had today. He's most widely known as the founder, and many of you will know, Bastyr University, which was founded here in Seattle by Dr. Joe and some of his friends and colleagues back in 1978. It's gone on to become really the first fully accredited university teaching natural medicine, naturopathic medicine, and is really, I think, I don't think you coined this, Dr. Joe, but I've heard Bastyr called the Harvard of naturopathic medicine, and I think that's true. And I think Bastyr is now, you're in San Diego, you just opened a place in Austin, and it's great to see Bastyr doing so well. And you led that organization for 22 years in addition to founding it. The doctor has also written several books, which I'm sure he'll integrate into our talk. He's also worked for a couple of presidents, including one I worked for some time ago, President Clinton and President Bush, where you brought naturopathic medicine into government and tried to see what we could do to improve our healthcare system that way. You've also got your wife, Laura, with you. Laura, nice to see you. Laura is one of the foremost experts in the country on bone health, and she's had a lot of osteoporosis in her family, and it's inspired her to become the expert that she is, and I'm sure you're going to integrate that into what we're talking about today. But we're excited to have you. You and I had a great conversation the other day about nutrition, and I'm a little later to the game in my plant-based eating than you were, because you've been doing it for, I don't know, 50, 60 years. I've been doing it for 3, but you had me at hello. I was convinced, and I know you're going to share with us, you know, you're a fountain of knowledge, and I know you're going to share with us lots of smart things today that we can do, you know, frankly, to improve our health, certainly at this unique time, but also really broadly. And I'm glad that you join us, and Laura, you too, and thanks for making time. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome.
Well, great. Well, thank you for the very kind introduction, Chris, and also my compliments for your leadership in Aegis Living. Being on the COVID-19 Council, I've been quite impressed with just how well you've done in this very, very challenging time. So thank you for inviting me to be part of your process.
Great
Okay, so let's see
you.
if we can get this share screen working properly. Share screen.
Yeah, okay. There you go.
Great. Now, can you see us? Okay, the slides okay? Great. Okay. So thank you for the invitation. Laura and I talked a lot about what to present, because during the holiday season, there are so many opportunities to be both more healthy, but also to increase disease risk. And we decided, rather than focus on, well, just eat this kind of turkey versus that kind of turkey, or, well, here's what food you should eat to avoid, to make it more resistant to COVID-19. We decided, what are the keys to being healthy? Just things that you can apply every day, practical guidance. So this presentation will last for about 30 minutes. And about the first 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about the primary reason why people are sick today. And then Laura and I are going to talk about what you can do about it. And then we're going to be wide open for any questions people may have. So what we're going to do here is do a review of this serious problem. We have the highest burden of chronic disease in every age group ever in human history. Why? Why are we so much sicker? We're now spending 20% of our gross domestic product on healthcare, and we're getting sicker and sicker. What's wrong? And we're going to use diabetes as the example, and we'll tell you why. And what you'll see from our diabetes example is that environmental toxins, these are chemicals and metals in the air, food, water, health and beauty aids, etc. These toxins have become the primary drivers of disease. Not that other factors aren't important, they've just become the worst. When we talk about toxins, we talk about non-persistent toxins, that is the toxins our bodies can get rid of very easily within hours to days, and persistent toxins. These are toxins that once they get into our body are very, very hard to get out. So the good news is that if people adopt a lifestyle to avoid as many of these non-persistent toxins as possible, within just 2 weeks, people start feeling better. And over time, you'll see their health becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. So we're going to talk about how you do this. So we have a worldwide epidemic of diabetes, and it's all over the world. Australian adults, but children. If you look at the numbers of children, Norway, Hong Kong, and such, it's not just adults getting the diabetes, it's children as well. Then you look in the US, this is adult data in the US. When I was in naturopathic medical school, way back here, okay, diabetes affected about 1% of the population. Now it's affecting about 10% of the population, and 1 out of 3 adults in the United States are projected to get diabetes in their lifetime. What happened? Our genetics didn't change. So the first thing we would think about is sugar. Now, I'm a naturopathic doctor, so of course I think people eat way too much sugar, and people do eat way too much sugar. And you can see from this graphic, starting about 1820, we just progressively increase our sugar consumption. But the diabetes epidemic didn't start until here, way after we started eating a lot of sugar. Now, it's possible this slight increase here was just enough to take us over the edge, but the data seems to show, even though sugar is not particularly good for us, by itself, it does not explain the diabetes epidemic. Okay, now how about obesity? No question about it. Obese people have dramatically more diabetes. So, I mean, look at this. Men who are morbidly obese, 42 times more likely to get diabetes. Women, 93 times more likely to get diabetes. So now it looks like, oh, we're obese, therefore we're getting so much diabetes. But look at this. Research has now shown that if you look at obese people and look at their body load of environmental toxins, obese people in the bottom 20% of body load of environmental toxins have no increased risk for diabetes. Remember, see what I just said? Everybody knows obesity causes diabetes, but if the fat is not full of toxins, you don't get diabetes. So here's some great research. This comes out of research by the name of Decky Lee out of South Korea. And she's the first one who about 10 years ago picked up on this correlation. Now, this is the prevalence of diabetes. This is not risk. This is people who already have diabetes. So across this axis, percent of people with diabetes. Across this axis is body load, is body weight. And across this axis is body load of environmental toxins. So you can see here, obese people in the top 20% of body load of environmental toxins, 60% of them have diabetes. But look over here, people in the bottom level of toxic load, look at this. There's no difference across the spectrum here. But look over here. Here we have a thin person in the top 20% of body load of environmental toxins, 30% of them already have diabetes. So as you can see, body load of toxins is a much stronger prediction of diabetes than is being overweight. So let's look more at this. Now let's start looking at specific toxins, look at metabolic syndrome or pre-diabetes. Now, as you can see, as body load goes up, the incidence of pre-diabetes goes up, and it's synergistic. And what I mean by that is 1 + 1 does not equal 2 for your risk. 1 + 1 = 3. And 1 plus 1 plus 1 does not equal 3. 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 10. So as the body load of these environmental toxins increases, the disease numbers go up dramatically. Now let's look at actual diabetes. This is looking at body load of a wide range of toxins. I won't get into it, but look at people in the top 10% of body load of these toxins. What are these toxins? The pesticides we put on our food. So we're not talking about rare. We're talking about 1 out of 10 people are doing pesticides that increase the risk of diabetes from 4 to 12-fold increased risk of diabetes. So you ever look at pesticides? How about bisphenol A? People are now becoming aware of bisphenol A is bad for us. Well, here we see in this diagram here, as bisphenol A levels go up, so does the risk of diabetes. And here's a really important point, folks, and we're going to be talking about this as we go along. Everybody's now aware of bisphenol A. So now people are choosing bisphenol A-free plastics. The problem is they're replacing bisphenol A with bisphenol F, bisphenol B, bisphenol S, and bisphenol Z. They're actually more toxic. So if you look at these huge databases of body load of environmental toxins, we're seeing bisphenol A starting to go down and going up at just the same rate or these other bisphenols. So there's actually no improvement. And matter of fact, it might even be worse. There's a study I just read looking at bisphenol S, and bisphenol S in this one study looking at infertile men found that 1 out of 3 infertile men for whom no other cause could be found, they had the highest levels of bisphenol S. So we're having an infertility epidemic, and these bisphenols are a cause of it. So then we start looking at what percent of diabetes is due to various toxins. Now, I won't get into the detail. This represents a huge amount of research work by my team. We look at PCBs. These are called polychlorinated biphenyls. Then we have phthalates, arsenic, bisphenol A, and other factors. But right here, phthalates, arsenic, bisphenol A account for about 50% of diabetes, and these are non-persistent toxins. That means if we stop exposing ourselves, the body will be able to get rid of them, and our body's going to start working better. Now, I think it's really important to recognize that toxin exposure happens every day. It's ubiquitous in our environment. It comes from burning gasoline and diesel fuels, bisphenol A, lead, mercury, thousands of chemicals in our environment, exhaust, pesticides, flame retardants, aluminum. I mean, just go on and on and on. All these things are adding up. Now, you might say, well, the daily exposure is really small. So you look at this. This is nanograms per day. Sounds really small. The problem is we can't get rid of them. So look at these things, the DDT and things like that, half-life, that's the time it takes to get rid of half of it, is over 2 years. But then you look at the PCBs, yeah, they're lower, that's not too bad. The problem is the half-life is 2 to 10 years. So in general, it takes 4 half-lives to get a toxin out of the body. So you eat a PCB, and it's going to take you, some of these things, 40, 50 years to get rid of it. One time eating the PCBs. So what happens is we get bioaccumulation. So as people get older, the levels of these things in the body increase. And it turns out when they get high enough, this is where you're starting to see all the disease that people are experiencing, because the body load of PCB, of these various toxins, has gotten so high, it's caused huge amounts of damage. And it's not just the chemicals. How about mercury? As people get older, they have more mercury. As they have more mercury, it causes more neurodegeneration. Okay. So now we get to strategies, what you can do about this. So here's some kind of 3 concepts to remember. Then we'll go through and now look at air and water and food and things like that. So first thing to do is stop letting anything come into your house that has chemicals or metals in it that could expose you. Secondly, start replacing everything in your house with safer choices. And then finally, be especially careful about the persistent toxins, because when once they're in the body, they take years to decades to get rid of. You gotta be extremely careful. All right, so how we decrease air pollution. So air pollution all over the world. Now, some areas are clearly worse than others, but wherever you got industrialization, wherever you've got coal being burned for energy, while people talk a lot about carbon dioxide, the mercury being released into the environment, in my opinion, is way worse than the carbon dioxide. So we have all these toxins in the air. And if you're living in a city or near a highway, the levels are even higher. Okay, so how about a strategy? simply taking off of your shoes before entering the house. So this is a great example where my dear wife, Laura, way before everybody else, I mean, decades ago, she instituted a policy, nobody could come into our house without taking off their shoes. So this is looking at a house, the amount of pesticides in the house before the study was done. They then had people walk into the house with their shoes and look what had happened to the pesticide levels. Now this was, the lawn had been sprayed with an herbicide. Something people do all the time. They want to get rid of their dandelions. They put this herbicide on their lawn. Well, yeah, it kills the dandelions, but guess what? It hurts us too. So these people with shoes on brought in a lot of these toxins. Simply taking off the shoes dramatically decreased the amount of toxins coming into the house. It wasn't zero, but it's significant. How about keeping the house clean? This is something that Laura is very knowledgeable about. And we have all these toxins in our houses. Cleaning, simply cleaning the house decreases toxic exposure. But then there's something else we recommend for everybody, and that is a whole house filter. If a person has a forced air heating, you want to put in at least a MERV 8 filter. This is what our filter looked like after 6 months, okay? We put in a MERV 16 filter. So what this is a filter, you can get this from any commercial or group that does air conditioning. It dramatically decreases toxins in the house. So air filter, run it 24 hours, constantly cleaning the air. Take off shoes before entering the house. Declare your house a scent-free zone. You might think, well, those perfumes and such we like to smell. That's fine. But the perfumes are foreign chemicals that our livers have to detoxify. So the more of these things you're smelling, the more things your liver has to detoxify. And when your liver's having to detoxify these fragrances, it then has less capability to detoxify the other toxins we're being exposed to. And then finally, plant to decrease chemicals in the air. So I know that people watching this are some of your clients. Well, in their rooms, they can have plants that decrease toxins. So here's an example of these toxins, of these plants: moss cane, pop mums,
Right.
Gerber, daisy,
Daisies.
Wernicke, I don't know what that is,
I don't know.
ficus. And ficus is something that we have. We have a
Yeah.
huge ficus plant. You might say, well,
Yeah, spider plants are pretty good at cleaning the air too. You can have a hanging spider plant. It'll help clean the air in your room.
great. Good. Okay. And then, so putting people in a clean room using a MERV 12 filter, what they found was just 2 days in a clean room, a 33 to 58% reduction in inflammatory mediators and reduction of blood pressure just by cleaning the air. Our cats joined us to make sure everybody pays attention here. Okay, so just look at that. Look at this. And you look at these numbers, these drops, that's what you get when you take drugs. Well, rather than taking drugs, well, how about cleaning the air supply?
And you'll also spend a lot less time cleaning your house.
Yes.
Which is a big plus for some of us.
Yeah, after putting the MERV 12 or MERV 16 filter in our house, the amount of dust in the house decreased dramatically. And remember over the summer, we had all those fires inside our house, you could not smell the smoke. You open the door, you get this wave of smoke coming in. It was really, really remarkably effective. Okay, decreased water pollution. If you want to get paranoid, I have all these diagrams I can show you with looking at our public water supplies have lead, they have arsenic, they have pesticides, etc. All many areas exceeding what's considered safe. It's all over the place. And look at Washington. Look at Washington. All this lead we have in Washington and over here in California, lots and lots of lead. Okay, so it turns out there's some good strategies. You can get a tabletop filter, one of these little things where you pour water in and the water goes through the filter. The problem is most of them don't work except zero water. So this research study, they just looked at a bunch of these, and I want to be very clear. We have no commercial relationship with these folks, but we had an opportunity. We were visiting some friends of ours, had a cabin up in the mountains, and their water tasted terrible. We tasted out of the tap. So they put it through this zero water filter, and it tasted great. So this is an example of a really good quality filter, what we recommend everybody have. And what it uses 3 technologies. It uses activated carbon, this thing here, and that gets rid of most of the chemicals. And then they use ion exchange, and that gets rid of metals like lead and cadmium and arsenic. Now, what we do in our house, this is the actual picture in our house. I actually installed this. We use a carbon block filter with a metal precipitator. So all the water that comes into our house is cleaned of virtually all the garbage that's in it. So not only is the water we're drinking clear, but when we're taking a shower, many of these toxic compounds volatilize and you breathe them. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is very useful.
And it's also really helpful for your skin and your hair,
Yes.
and your clothes. You know, everything lasts longer, including your body.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, and you have to put a chlorine tablets in your toilet bowl tanks because it gets rid of the chlorine too. Okay. Now that's important because while the chlorination of the water supply has played a huge role in improving human longevity by killing off organisms in the water supply, when you kill off the organism in the water supply, that chlorine, when it binds to the organic compounds in the organisms, it produces carcinogenic compounds. So the public health people know we'll get more cancer by putting chlorine into the water supply, but fewer people will die from infectious disease. So let's get both benefits. Let's not have infections, but also let's not take in these carcinogens. Okay, decrease food pollution. So about, near as I can tell, about 60% of the total toxic load that people experience comes from our food. Okay, so where does it come from? Well, one from fish. So big fish versus small fish, 1,000-fold variation in the amount of mercury. So big tuna, lots of mercury. Very small anchovies and small salmon, very, very low, very low levels of mercury. But here's a really critical one. Farmed fish. Never eat farmed fish because it's full of PCBs. And once you eat a farmed fish, those PCBs go in your body and they take years to decades to get rid of. So this is comparing PCB levels in farmed fish versus wild. And as you can see, the farmed fish is way, way higher. And unfortunately, I don't know why it is, the fish come from Ireland, whether it's wild or farmed, dramatically higher levels of PCBs. And this is where we're really fortunate here in the Seattle area, and that is we can get fish from Alaska. And that fish from Alaska, the wild salmon from Alaska, very, very low levels of PCBs, very, very low levels of mercury. Now, does eating organically make a difference? This study was actually done in Seattle, okay? And they basically look at kids who are buying their food from PCC, or parents who are buying food from PCC, compared to kids whose parents were buying their food from the regular grocery store, and they look at the organophosphate pesticides in their bodies. Now, organophosphate pesticides are neurological poisons, okay? And so the theory is, well, we put them on such low levels of our food supply, it's not going to cause neurological damage. Well, folks, it does cause neurological damage. So children here eating conventionally grown foods, they have twice as much ADHD. And if they're born to mothers with high levels of organophosphate pesticides, they have a 7-point drop in IQ compared to children born to mothers with low levels of organophosphate pesticides. And this has been proven in a bunch of studies. Scary stuff. Now, some good news is that if you have to buy chemically grown foods, you can wash those foods and get rid of a lot of the pesticides. And it turns out acid washes, like with vinegar and things like this, are actually pretty good at getting rid of many of these toxins. Now, it's not only the issue of organic foods, toxins versus high toxins in conventionally grown foods versus low toxins in organically grown foods, but organically grown foods have way more nutrients in them than conventionally grown foods. Another factor, sorry, I'm kind of going right on.
That's okay.
Another factor is,
you're a good talker.
How do you store your foods? So these are several studies where they looked at buying foods in cans, like soup, versus making it at home. So this one was done with Progresso lentil soup, which used to be my favorite until I saw this study. And it turns out that one serving a day for a week increases BPA levels by a factor of 12. And this study looked at drinking soy milk from a can versus from glass. They got a 16-fold increase in BPA levels, and they found an increase in blood pressure. Now, remember I talked about how bisphenol A increases risk of diabetes. So what's the threshold to double the risk of diabetes? Looking at bisphenol A, it's right here. So 1 serving a week of soy milk in cans will double your risk of diabetes. 2 servings a week of soup in cans will double risk of diabetes. Here I just said only 2 servings per week of canned soup will double the risk of diabetes, and people consume way more than that. Now, strategies foods. How about you talk about this one, Dara?
Well, Joe really is the primary activator in our garden, but I'll go through this as best as I can. If you have a place where you can grow some foods, put some pots on a deck, or join one of the areas where we have areas for a bunch of people to come and grow food in a CSA plot, please try to do that. For one thing, the food that you're going to grow is not going to taste anything like the stuff you get from the store. You will be just blown away by the difference in flavor and what it actually tastes like. And it will have a lot more nutrients, and it's really good exercise to be out working in your garden. And then also when you're cooking at home, you want to save all the cuttings and peelings and everything, and you can just put them in a compost bin, like the little silver one on the top there, and then you add it back into your garden. So at least I feel a lot better now when I'm chopping things up, and if I see a part of a vegetable that doesn't look perfect, I'll just toss it into the big compost bin, and I know it's going to go back into the garden. You definitely want to eat organic as much as possible. I've taped a number of videos on organics and why it's so much more important. The nutrient density is far higher, mainly for minerals. Many minerals are basically not there in our food anymore, and they are in organic food. And also the pesticides. So when you eat conventionally grown, or as Joe would say, chemically grown foods, you get less nutrition and more toxins. If you have to eat chemically grown food, use the environmental working groups. That's the next one. Okay, there's a group that has told us which foods are the worst contaminated with pesticides and which are the least. And so you want to avoid the ones that are the worst contaminated, and at least wash them with a mild vinegar and water solution. On the farmed fish or the large fish, just don't eat those. It's not worth it.
So this is an example of what we're doing here. So these are 2 compost bins we have on our deck. And the reason why I use 2 is it takes about, they're cleaner now.
Yeah, they look really clean in this slide. Clean them up.
Anyway, so the reason I use 2 is because it takes about 6 months for these things to totally convert the food scraps into this really great organic fertilizer. So we'll looking at, for example, this one, we'll fill it up, and when it's done, then we'll leave it alone and we'll start filling this up. And when this one's done, well, this one's ready to empty out into our garden and work great. So this is what our garden looks like. We get these beautiful beans, and look at all these vegetables got from our garden. It's surprisingly easy to grow great food in the garden, and we don't have to use pesticides and things like that because we grow our food with lots of nutrients, so they're resistant to these pests and things like this.
And you don't need a really big plot either. I mean, you'll get an astounding amount of food out of a small area.
Okay, you want to talk about this?
Oh, so here's the list of the Dirty Dozen. This is an old one. You got to update this slide. They bring it out every year because it does change the foods that are the worst and that you really want to buy organic for sure. You can go to environmentalworkinggroup.org, EWG.org, for their most current list. And the ones that are the more clean ones, those are fine. They're not going to have enough pesticide residues to be harmful, and you can save the money on those. But the ones that are the Dirty Dozen, and they've now expanded it to like 13 or 14, you really want to avoid those if at all possible.
Yes. So when they're conventionally grown, they have lots of chemicals on them. They're really problematic. Okay, next we have the health and beauty aids. So it turns out that these lotions and potions we put on our skin, they're full of these chemicals that cause trouble, like the parabens, estrogenic, anti-androgenic, poison the mitochondria that produce our energy, impair our ability to detoxify other kinds of toxins. Phthalates they're used in the health and beauty aids. They're part of what, when you smell the fragrances in health and beauty aids.
The fake scents, not real scents.
Right, but the phthalates are used to solubilize and stabilize the fragrances. Well, these things cause allergies, asthma, autism, diabetes, infertility, low testosterone, mood disorders, obesity, and reduced cognition. That's what the research says. As body levels go up, these things happen more. And here's an example looking at a person like me who uses none of these things, okay, versus when they started to add cologne and aftershave and hair gel and deodorant and lotion. As you add these things, this person here using all these chemicals that are widely marketed, they have 300 times as much phthalates in their body. And these phthalates are making them sick. So what do you do about it?
Well, there's some apps you can use. Think Dirty is one of them. Environmental Working Group also has a whole compendium of resources where you can check to see if the health and beauty aids that you're using are clean or not. When we first started really getting into this, I went through all the stuff that I was gooping myself with and threw out a lot of really expensive health and beauty aids that were really not good for me. But I have since then found some other beauty suppliers that make really nice products that are, they help me look and smell and feel a little better, and they do not damage me at the same time. So you can really find these resources online. You don't have to give up, shampoo and et cetera, and body lotion, and you can have something that doesn't hurt you. So, yeah.
Okay, and then now we've got house and yard chemicals. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into these, but these things are, the things we use to clean our homes and to deal with our property. They're full of chemicals that damage our body. Okay, so this is what we've done. This is Laura's formula.
Yeah. So what I usually do, I have kind of an all-purpose solution that I make, which is just water and distilled white vinegar and a few drops of essential oil. I vary between the essential oils that I use. For the kitty litter box, I use rosemary and thyme because it smells more outdoorsy. For the rest of the house, I usually just use lavender. Sometimes I use lavender and rose oil. And you can also put a small spray bottle with lavender or rose oil or whatever, cinnamon and for Christmas in a spray bottle and leave that in your bathroom instead of using one of the sprays that has phthalates and God knows what else in it that you'll inhale. So things can smell nice and clean. Also, this is so much cheaper than buying prepared cleaning agents. Your house will be completely clean and without the chemicals, and it'll cost you, 1/100th as much.
Okay, so does this work? Well, here's some research where they looked at people who had some health problems. They put them in a chemical-free living space. I mean, a large number of people, and then they looked at how many thought they were harmed by it, how many thought there was no effect, how many thought they were helped. And what they found was virtually everybody, when put into a clean environment, or at least 95% of them, their health gets better. They can actually physically perceive their health being better. So what are our key health takeaways? We kind of brought this down to some do's and don'ts. Do, eat organically grown foods. Eat at least 50 grams of fiber a day. Now, I didn't talk about this, didn't have enough time, but the key mechanism by which your body gets rid of many of these toxins is by getting them out through the liver into the gut. Now, as we evolved as a species, we were consuming 100 to 150 grams of fiber a day. So when the toxins got into the gut, it went out through the stools. Now we only consume 15 to 20 grams of fiber a day. So when our liver goes through all the trouble, get rid of the toxin, dump it into the stool and into the gut, they get reabsorbed through something called intrahepatic recirculation. So we basically sabotaged the key mechanism by which we have for getting rid of toxins by not eating enough fiber. Plenty of fluids critical, removing shoes before entering the house, use air filters, use water filters, make your own cleaning agents. Don'ts. You want to do this one?
Sure. Don't eat farmed or large fish. Don't use nonstick cooking utensils. The chemicals in them will volatilize when they're heated, and it'll go into the air. So you'll breathe it in, which is a really effective delivery system to go right into your lungs and into your circulation, or it'll go into the food and you'll consume it that way.
Let me interrupt for a second. So these things have, these Teflon and Cera coatings have what are called PFOAs. So what happens is, yes, the food does not stick to the pan, but the PFOAs do stick to the food. So when people are using these pans, their levels of PFOAs go up, and PFOAs have a half-life of 5 years in the body.
You want to use health and beauty aids that are clean, and it is really easy to find them, and you can find great, good quality ones that are not all that expensive and will work very well for you. Do not eat foods from cans. The can lining, the chemicals in the can lining get into the food and will get into you. Do not use plastic food storage containers. We've switched now pretty much to Pyrex. As a matter of fact, one of my Christmas presents this year, I've been told, are some new Pyrex containers, because we always, you know how the top always breaks, so then you have a bowl, but you have no top for it, and we're not using plastic wrap on the top of our bowls anymore. So I'm now getting new Pyrex containers with a glass lid with a silicone rim. So and you can freeze those as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. And you know, use air fresheners, but make them yourself. Get a spray bottle, put water in it, and a few drops of whatever essential oil you'd like to have in your house at the time. And you can change it throughout the year. And cinnamon is really nice at Christmas time. And everything will smell wonderful, and you won't get sick. So
Air fresheners, okay. The commercial ones put more chemicals into the air. It's not good. Okay, that completes our presentation. So let's open up for questions. Now, do you want me to stop the slideshow so we can just see the whole screen?
Yeah, Joe, if you don't mind, that'd be great. That was great. I'm
going to
just encourage anybody that's on the webinar that we'll be happy to take your questions. If you just want to put them in the chat feature there, that'd be great. And I don't know where to start, right? I think one thing that I think all of us are thinking about right now is immunity, right? How we boost our immune systems to, whether it's COVID or anything else, right, that we're fighting. And I'm just struck by the toxins thing, which I've read a little bit of your book, and I know you've been studying this for a very long time, but we all should be far more conscious of what we're putting in our bodies, no matter what age we are. And I think one thing we've learned at Aegis is no matter when you start working on your health, it's never too late,
Never too soon.
Yeah, never too soon. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how these, so I understand the half-life of toxins in your body and how you begin to get them out. How does that affect your immunity? I mean, especially in the short term.
Great question. So when we look at what shows up first with the toxins, so here we should talk about these chronic diseases where you've been exposed to toxins for a long period of time. Interestingly, in terms of short term, the areas that show the effects of toxins first are neurological system, the immune system, and the energy production system. So that's what we see with patients first. And immune dysfunction, allergies, and or increased susceptibility to infections are what you see first. Because it turns out the white cells are affected very, very fast by these toxins. If you look at white cell count, as toxin levels go up, white cell count goes down. If you look at toxin levels, I actually have a whole lecture just on toxins and immune dysfunction. You look at as body load of toxins goes up, the level of bacteria and viruses and fungi that are in our body normally, they go up as well because we can't get rid of these things that we're normally being exposed to. So there's just so many examples of these things impairing immune system function.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. Well, I'm going to open it up to anybody who has questions. I mean, I have a million, but I'm happy to, folks on, you don't even need to put it in the chat if you want. We've got a right size group that we can certainly ask questions, and I'll open it up to the group if you have questions for Dr. Joe or Laura.
Yes. So the question was the long-term effects of the air fresheners. So the air fresheners basically expose people to phthalates and to synthetic fragrances. And so as phthalate levels go up, yeah, I think you saw that list I showed there. One of the things they do is they bind to the insulin receptor sites on our cells. So what do I mean by that? So you have our cell, and on our cell is a little receptor site. Let's call it my wedding ring here, a receptor site. Well, so normally insulin connects to that receptor site and says, okay, let sugar in. Fine, you let sugar in, everything's fine. But phthalates cover it up. So in order to get the sugar into the cells to keep us alive, our pancreas has to overproduce insulin to force sugar into the cells. Well, that's fine. Our body's remarkably adaptive. But when you do that to the pancreas for 20 or 30 years, where you're way overworking it, the pancreas burns out, and now we can't maintain our blood sugar levels anymore, and now we start getting diabetes. Okay, next one.
Doctor, you've got a question here about from Susie on how do you approach large-scale commercial kitchens? You know, there may be budget restrictions. Plant and animal foods are usually conventional. Soups come out of cans. Everything's in plastics.
Yes.
How would you approach the change in this situation? It's a great question.
Great question. And I must admit to some trepidation given this presentation when I realized your client's going to be asking for this. Okay.
Sure, and that's important.
Yeah, I think it is, yes. So I think you kind of look at what are the worst offenders, what are the most inexpensively fixed things, and progressively work your way through. So when we look at the worst offenders, this plastic storage equipment is probably the worst in terms of the short-term toxins. All these things are being stored in these big plastic tubs or coming in cans, as you're saying. That's the first place to start working, is to decrease those. And then in terms of or foods, that's where we show that list from the Environmental Working Group, showing which foods you don't have to worry about buying organically, just wash them well. And the other foods where you shouldn't eat them unless they're organically grown. And if you have to get them conventionally grown, then you need to wash them with vinegar, for example. That table showed the things to wash it with. So wash it. So that's kind of first part, is get rid of as much plastic as possible. Try buying organically grown food where you can. And if you can't, make sure you wash it as thoroughly as possible with these ways of getting the pesticide residues down.
And you know, I don't know about the whole big industrial kitchen, but at least in terms of cooking at home, it is a lot less expensive to cook your own food than to buy it in a can. What we usually do, I have an Instapot, which I would heartily recommend to anybody. I don't know if they make industrial sized Instapots, but I can make a homemade split pea soup in 7 minutes in my Instapot, a huge batch of it. And then I have mason jars that I can put in the freezer. So I make a big batch. I put half of it in mason jars in the freezer. We eat the rest of it for a few days. And then when I'm working late and I can't cook something, we have something available. I do that with beans, with soup. Joe's asked me to try doing it with eggplant parmesan. I don't know if that's going to work, but I'll give it a shot. At any rate, you can make a large batch of something from scratch and then freeze a good chunk of it. It will cost you probably 1/10 of what it costs you to buy it in the can, and the food will be better.
Can I ask you all, we've gotten used to BPA free, and I was really struck by, every water bottle out there says, oh, BPA free, so it must be okay. But what you said was BPF and BPS are potentially more dangerous than BPA. So what should we do? What do we drink out of?
Stainless steel.
Stainless steel or glass.
Or glass.
That's the best things.
Yeah.
And you might say, but it's only a glass, it's only a bottle. It's not that much. It's true, not that much, but it's not the only source. And that's why so much of this was missed by the researchers up until about 10 years ago, is because, well, there's not that much bisphenol A in that plastic. And if you just look at bisphenol A all by itself, that's not that bad. But the problem is we're not just exposed to bisphenol A. We're now exposed, I mean, seriously, I've looked at a lot of research. There are now about 100 chemicals and metals and metalloids, arsenic, techniques, and metalloid. We're exposed to about 100 of these at levels that together cause all this disease. So every choice we can make every day, when next time we go out and buy something, yes, it's going to be more expensive buying the glass version. But over time, it's going to make you healthier because you're not putting that chemicals from that source.
And you're not putting that plastic into the environment either.
That's true.
If we all boycotted plastic, things would change, like a lot of things would change for the better pretty rapidly.
Well, you've probably got a very supportive audience here, but you know, thinking about those toxins, are there ways to, you know, because many of us, you know, we're not as enlightened as you were, you know, many years ago. Maybe I'll volunteer myself. I wasn't that enlightened, but more so today. Are there any ways to accelerate, you know, so you quit, you make these very conscious decisions to live your life in a different way, and that's great, but you still got these toxins in your body. Is there a way to accelerate getting rid of them, given that
Yes.
they've got these
Sweat.
half-life?
Great question.
Sweat.
Saunas.
A lot, yeah. Have a sauna if you have access to one. If you don't, just get sweaty.
Right. So there's a researcher, an MD in Edmonton, Alberta, named Stephen Genuis. Great guy. If you ever had a chance to listen to him lecture, do so. He's really entertaining as well as interesting. So he did a study. He took 10 normal people and he put them in a sauna. Then he scraped off their sweat and measured what was in the sweat. Okay. And it was scary. And what he found, which was particularly interesting, not only was sweat a good way to get rid of things like PCBs that are so hard to get out of the body, they were finding toxins in the sweat that weren't in the urine or the blood, because they were so bad. The body did everything it could to just kind of sequester it away, try to minimize how much damage it was doing to get out of the blood. And when they're sweating, now you got another organ elimination, and the body finally says, we can get rid of it. So it takes about 20 minutes of sweating freely in order to get these toxins out of the body. So what I recommend for people, they should do a sauna at least once a week. It has to sweat for at least 20 minutes. So the temperature is up to you, however it takes to sweat really well for at least 20 minutes. Drink plenty of fluids. So measure your body weight before you do the sauna, have fluids, measure your body weight. After you're done with the sauna, it should be the same. And if it's not the same, typically be lower, you're just not drinking enough water. And there's a little trick here, and that is if you alkalinize the water a little bit, it helps the body detoxify. Or what I mean by that, if you put in potassium or magnesium citrate, something you get from a health food store, put these into the water just a little bit, it makes the water more alkaline, it makes your body more alkaline, and it makes it easier for the kidneys to get rid of the toxins, easier for the skin to get rid of the toxins. Now pregnant women. I think everybody's aware that the current recommendation is pregnant women should not do saunas because of potential fetal damage. So the research is very clear that, you know, here in the U.S. there was a big study in Boston many years ago, and they found that women who were pregnant who did hot tubs had more fetal abnormalities. But when they then looked at pregnant women in Finland, they found that women, the more they did saunas, had lower fetal abnormalities. As a matter of fact, Finland has the lowest level of fetal abnormalities anywhere in the world. What they discovered was that since women in Finland regularly sauna, their bodies were more used to being in a sauna, so body temperature did not get up too high. Whereas women who did not regularly sauna or use a hot tub, they weren't used to it, so the body temperature got too high. So as long as you keep the core body temperature below 39 degrees centigrade, there's no fetal abnormalities.
Got a couple of questions here. So is the effect of toxins inflammatory in addition to harming the liver, brain, and body cells?
Oh, absolutely. So the toxins, one of the key mechanisms by which they cause damage. So we look at the toxins. In general, as a category, they increase oxidative stress in the body, and that increases inflammation. So they all increase inflammation.
Oxidative stress is when you have too much free radical damage and not enough antioxidants available to quench it. That's what oxidative stress is. So
all the toxins increase oxidative stress, and then each individual toxin has its own mechanism of damage. So it's so important to get these toxins out of the body, because they have not only specific effects, but they have systemic effects as well. So that led me to want to talk about something else: autoimmune disease, systemic lupus erythematosus, rheumatoid arthritis, things of this nature. So as an naturopathic doctor, I've always wondered to myself, why would our smart bodies become allergic to themselves? Didn't make sense. Then some friends of mine started doing some research about 5 years ago, where they were very carefully in the laboratory looking at what these immune cells were reacting to. And it turns out they weren't reacting to normal cells. What they were reacting to was, when you're exposed to chemicals and metals, many times they will bind to normal tissues. And what was a normal tissue, that immune system said, yeah, that's our stuff, we're fine. By binding a metal chemical, it becomes an abnormal tissue. So the body is actually reacting to the abnormal tissues. Now you might say, well, that sounds interesting theoretically. So let me give you a story. So I lecture now on environmental medicine, literally all over the world. I mean, Russia, I just give you all over the world. And I was giving a lecture in Minneapolis 3 years ago to a group of medical doctors who were interested in this field. And one of the medical doctors, unbeknownst to me, was suffering from advanced systemic lupus erythematosus, or SLE. Very significant, very serious disease for people, primarily in women. And she heard about my talk about toxins, about how toxins can cause autoimmunity. So she went on my protocol and got really clean living, got the toxins out of her body. And I lectured again to the same group a year ago, because I like me to come back every few years to say, what's the latest research? She came up to me afterwards during lunch, which was not organic, by the way. It kind of pissed me off. You think they're listening to me, they should have organic food for lunch, but they didn't. Anyway, she came up to me and she said, well, I followed your protocol and my SLE is gone. So this is a medical doctor, could not cure SLE with drugs, decided to do detoxification instead. She totally got rid of it. Okay, so this is real, folks. I have so many story case histories I can give you of people with this, that, and the other chronic disease. We got the toxins out and they got better. And something's really important. We start thinking about this way of improving health. You have to realize it takes time. We've been programmed to believe, oh, you have a problem? Well, take this drug. Your symptoms will be gone pretty soon. I mean, your joint's swollen. And say, oh, I'll take some aspirin. Oh, within a few hours, the pain's better.
Well, your symptoms may be gone, but your disease is not gone.
Exactly. The short-term things take care of the symptoms, not the causes. So let's look at somebody who's having a disease due to toxins. I'll give you an example of a woman who came to see me, 67 years old, early stage dementia, freaking out. And by the way, one of the wealthiest women in Canada, okay, came to see me. And she brain fog, losing her memory, hair dry, bad breath, early stage dementia. She was just freaked out and came to me as the last resort. So I tested her out, super high levels of mercury. So I put on a mercury detoxification program. So here's what it is. You first have to identify what is the toxin, okay? Then you have to stop exposure to the toxin. Then you got to get the toxins out of the body. Now the tissues that are poisoned by that toxin have to be regenerated, mainly the enzymes have to be regenerated, and now the body can heal itself. So you start with a mercury level of 50, and maximum is, quote, safe. There's no safe level of mercury, but below 5 is not too bad. Hers was 50. 6 months later, it was 17, and she's noticing improvement in symptoms. Another 6 months, she's now down to 7. Really much better. 6 months later, we're now a year and a half out, her mercury's down to 3.5. All her neurological deficiencies were gone, functioning just fine. Hair was fine, brain was fine, all these things were just great. But it took a year and a half. So a lot of people who get into detoxification concepts expect really fast results like drugs. No, it doesn't work that way. It takes time for the body to heal. But give the body a chance, it does heal.
Okay, really, really practical. In addition to all that great advice you gave us, what can we do right now to boost our immunity as we all, kind of fight to stay clear of this virus? And
so if you're looking at COVID-19, I co-authored a paper that's in PubMed. You can go back, you can look at it. I think it came out in March in PubMed. There's some very, very important strategies. And when you look at nutrients, the most important nutrients are vitamin D and zinc and vitamin C. Those three are critically important. And I advise everybody who wants to increase the resistance to SARS-CoV-2, you got to make sure your vitamin D levels are good. You got to make sure your zinc levels are good. You got to make sure your vitamin C is good. Vitamin A is another important one. I mean, all the nutrients are important, but those are by far the strongest research. So now, how much does a person need? The only way to be sure is by testing, but in general, the average person needs about 4,000 units of vitamin D a day.
D3, not D2.
D3, by the way, not D2. About 4,000 units of vitamin A a day, about 25 milligrams of zinc a day, and I recommend at least 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C twice a day. So for me, that's the best way to decrease people susceptible to infections.
And the vitamin A has to be real vitamin A,
Yeah.
not pro vitamin A,
not
not beta carotene. About 88% of people do not do a good job of converting beta carotene to retinoic acid, which is actual vitamin A.
Yeah. So people often say, well, I'm taking beta carotene, and it's called the same as vitamin A, but it's not, because beta carotene is actually two vitamin A's bound together, has to be cut in half to get the vitamin A's out. Well, you talk about this research.
There are enzymes that are required to do that. And most of us don't produce good versions of them. Our genetic inheritance includes slow, ineffective versions of those enzymes.
So particularly vegetarians run into trouble with vitamin A deficiency, particularly if they're orange. If you have a vegetarian, particularly vegan, who's kind of orange, you've got to test their vitamin A levels because they're probably not converting.
Okay, we only got a couple of minutes left here. And by the way, I'm glad you're saying that because we're working with our primary care docs with our residents right now to boost vitamin D levels, right?
Great.
Much higher because we believe that's such a strong deterrent for the virus. Can you just talk about any foods you'd call out that really contain these naturally that you'd want us eating more of?
You want to cover that one?
Well, obviously citrus fruits for vitamin C. Broccoli is also a really good source of vitamin C if you can get people to eat it. For vitamin A, really the best source of vitamin A is liver, and since no one will eat that anymore, and if you're going to eat liver, it really has to be organic because the liver is our cleansing, detox. It's the garbage recycling detox facility. All the junk goes there. You don't want to eat liver unless it's organic. But if you can get people to eat liver, that's probably the best source. Otherwise, cod liver oil has some vitamin A in it. Another scrumptious food that everyone loves, cod liver oil. So I really just recommend taking a supplement for vitamin A. It comes in a really small pill. It's easy to just take it along with your vitamin D.
So vitamin D, of course, sun exposed is the best. Right. But here in Seattle, 6 months out of the year, I don't care how much sun you get, the sun's too low, so there's no ultraviolet, you won't make vitamin D. So vitamin D is one of the things I recommend people should take as a supplement.
Yeah, for zinc, the best food source is oysters, but a lot of people don't like those either.
And so nuts and seeds.
Yeah, pumpkin seeds are a pretty decent source
of zinc.
Last question. There are a lot of vitamins and supplements out there. Is there any particular brands that you think are free of any? I assume there's lots of things in certain things we shouldn't have. Any brands that you recommend?
Yeah, there are good brands. So let me say first, quality control is really, really important. So there's a company called Emerson Ecologics, and they actually maintain a list of the good quality supplement manufacturers. Now, I have a conflict of interest because I'm a scientific consultant for a company called Natural Factors. But the reason I am willing to be a consultant for them because they're one of the companies that do it right. It turns out it adds about 15% to the cost of a supplement to do all the proper quality control. So that you got to look at the raw materials, and then you got to test, and then you have to test the finished product to make sure that nothing got contaminated and nothing got damaged. That's about 15%. So we use Natural Factors products. There are other ones that are good as well. So I want to be real clear about the conflict of interest there.
Yeah, any company that you look at on the internet, that you're interested in buying a supplement from, if you go to their webpage, they should have a section entitled Quality Control, and they should show you the testing that they do to ensure that their products are clean. And if they do not have that, you do not want to use their products.
And it has to be a third-party testing.
Right.
Look, we're out of time. We could probably talk all night. I wish I just had you guys just on, my lifeline. I could just ask questions anytime. You're a font of information, and I'm sure everybody on this call really enjoyed it. And there'll be a lot of people who will watch this that will also benefit from it. One of the questions was, are you willing to share your slides? I don't know if we.
Oh, sure. I'll send it over to you.
Anyone on the call that would like those slides, if you send Kelly a note where you RSVP, I'd be happy to share those with you. And I can't say thank you enough. I've, huge respect for the work you've both done, and thank you for what you've done to help us protect our residents during this COVID, virus.
Well.
We all need to stay healthy. You gave us some great advice, so thank you guys. Great to see you.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, we go.